Hi everyone. Can everybody hear me all right? Hello, can everyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? Perfect. Hi Katie. I am really sorry about the scheduling issue yesterday and not getting the link and everything. I'm really excited about this class and we have a lot of stuff to cover in 3 days. And so we're going to jump in and I want to make sure that all of you get all of your questions answered. So if we run over time or anything, that's totally fine because I want to answer your questions. So I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about how this class is going to work and what you can expect. So the reason that I created this class is that I had talked to, I've coached all of these incredible illustrators who have spent years developing their style and building their portfolio and putting their work together, and they've never pitched a client, and they've never gone out there and just presented their work to a client because they wanted to make sure they did it in the right way and they weren't sure what the right steps were or how to go about it. And so I have studied kind of different ways that artists approach clients, but I have also built my own freelance business through going out and pitching clients, and I've consulted with agencies who need help going out and finding clients. So that is kind of my specialty. And so through talking to the artists and then taking my experience, I kind of broke down a system or a process that you can use to start going out and approaching clients so you feel less intimidated and so you go out there feeling confident about what you're presenting. So today's session is all about crafting your pitch. And this is essentially how you talk about your business when you're approaching potential new clients, how you talk about your work, and what your brand is and figuring out how to present that. And so I really wanted to get a sense of who we had in this class. And so that's why I sent out that survey yesterday. And we have an incredible group of artists with a wide range of experiences. So I'm really excited to be in this class. And if you want to share a little note in the chat room about where you're from and the type of illustration that you specialize in so you guys can kind of get to know each other, that would be great. So the first thing we're going to talk about when approaching art directors is the first step is figuring out who is going to buy your work. And so that is figuring out one, what market or markets your work fits in, and then what companies within those markets are going to be most interested in your work. And so typically you might be like, I want to do children's illustration or I want to do product illustration. But within those markets, there are tons of different companies and they all kind of function in different ways. And so the first step is kind of figuring out where your artwork's going to fit and then what type of work you want to go out and seek. And so if you guys do, I would love if you put in the chat room the market that you are working in or the markets that you want to work in. And that would help me out. Uh, in the beginning, it will seem like, well, my work could fit in many different markets. I could do books, or I could do editorial, or I could do licensing. And so the best way to decide what market your work's going to fit in is to study the business model of that specific market. So if you want to do surface pattern design and you want to do designs for fabric companies, well, in the kind of fabric market, most of their designs are licensed. And so you're probably going to have to go down the licensing route. If you want to do a stationery business and you want to put your artwork on stationery items, you may need to develop your own products, or you might need to work as a freelancer for other greeting card companies. But you need to understand how those markets pay people, how they hire people, and what that model looks like. Because a lot of times people will say, oh, I want to illustrate books. But the reality is, if once you put a book proposal together and you approach publishers, one book is maybe like $5,000 that you're making. So you have to get like many, many book deals and have revenue coming from other areas, depending on what your income goals are and what your personal goals are. And so it's a matter of figuring out where does your art fit, but also what markets do you want to be working in? So people really like the editorial world could be really great for illustrators because they're constantly needing more work. So, product companies launch a new line of products maybe 3 times a year, but editorial publications may be putting content out on a weekly or monthly basis so you can get more consistent work. Whereas book illustration, you're going to spend a lot of time kind of getting that one deal, and then that deal is probably going to open doors into more deals. And so it kind of takes a little bit longer to get cash in the door. And so you really want to spend some time looking at the different markets that your work might fit in and understanding how those markets function. And so in your assignment today, you're going to get a list of the different markets and some instructions to help you kind of start to brainstorm and narrow down which markets your artwork is going to work best in and which markets are going to help you reach your financial and personal career goals. Because a lot of times people don't share kind of the reality of the different business types, and so you can end up in a business that you never wanted to be in, or selling things in a way that you never wanted to. And so really taking time to understand those markets and understand the options and laying out which ones are the best fit for you. It's going to help make sure that all of the work you're doing is pointing you in the direction you want to go. And two, it's going to teach you so much about how those markets function and how they think about hiring talent, which is going to help you in developing your pitch. Awesome. Okay, so does anyone have any initial questions about figuring out what market their work it fits in, or does everyone feel like they have a good handle on what markets their artwork works best for? You guys are a quiet bunch. You can type in there and just let me know. So you're gonna first decide what markets you want to work in. And then you're going to start looking at the different companies within those markets, because your goal is to figure out who is the person that I'm going to be pitching, who is my ideal client. So it's not Random House isn't your ideal client. An art director in a specific section of Random House who is interested in a specific style, like she is your target client. And so even when you get narrowed down to what companies you want to work with, you still have to narrow down to who is that person that I'm selling to. So you first figure out what markets you want to work in, and then you look at what companies you want to work with. And so start out by making a list of 10 to 15 companies that you would just love to work with. And don't just think locally, think on a national scale. You can include local clients if you think they would be a great fit, but make a list of these companies. And then you're going to spend some time looking at each of these companies and studying their business. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to look at first their about page and their company overview, and just read it and figure out like what details you can get from it. Are they an international company? Does it say if they're a publisher, how many titles they publish each year, or how many, if they're an editorial publication, how often they publish new work? Look on their website to see if there's an artist submission page. Like, how do they ask to receive work from artists? How do they, want artists to approach them? Look at their LinkedIn page and see how many employees they have, and try and get a sense of how big they are and what artists have they worked with in the past and what types of projects do they work on. And that will help you narrow down where you fit within that company. So one of my first jobs was at a PR agency, and it was a big PR agency in New York, and we worked on a bunch of brands for Procter and Gamble. And so we had like Tide and Pantene, and I can't even think of all of them, but it's just all like the beauty brands. And people would approach us for sponsorship or advertising opportunities, and they would email me because I was the digital marketing manager. They would email me with the opportunity, and it might be, but sorry, they would email me with the opportunity. And a lot of times it'd be like, would any of your clients be interested in this? But what they didn't realize is that we had 25 clients, and each client had an account supervisor, an account director, a VP, an SVP, and then like 6 account managers who manage that program. And so, in order for me to sell it into one client, I was going to have to convince a bunch of people that this was a really good idea. If I wanted to sell it into more than one client, I was going to have to convince even more people it was a good idea. And so it was hard. What people didn't realize is that there were so many people in the company, there were over 100 employees, that because there were so many people working on, this small collection of clients, that we all had kind of limited decision-making power. So I had the power to decide like what conferences we attended and things like that. But, the account teams had the power to decide what media publications we worked with and what influencers we partnered with. And so that same structure and that same problem happens within big companies too. And so an editorial publication has a creative director and art directors and then editors and then art producers and graphic designers. And they all have different roles and they work together in different ways. And so a lot of times people will feel defeated if they reach out to a potential client and don't hear back or don't get any feedback, that maybe just that company as a whole does not want to work with them, when in reality, they probably just pitched the wrong person. So the more you know about the companies that you're going after, and the more you know about the people that work there, and the more kind of information you can gather from the internet that paints a picture of what it is they're doing before you approach them, that gives you even more power into convincing them that you are the perfect person for their project. So does anyone have any questions about that so far? You guys are so quiet, so I want to check in frequently in case there are any questions. So don't be shy if you have any. So then you're gonna have a list of companies that you want to work with, and understanding of kind of how those companies work with artists and how they function. And then so that's kind of going to be your project. And the goal of this assignment, and I'm going to send you details with how to do this, but the goal of this assignment is to figure out who your target customer is. Who is the person that you're going to be pitching? So that when you're going out after the right people. So tomorrow we're going to talk about building your list and building a list of people to pitch. And so we're going to go more in depth on how to find those companies and find people at those companies. But the goal of this exercise is to help you figure out what types of companies you're going to go after and what those companies are looking for in the artists that they work with, and kind of how those companies are structured. And all of that information is going to help you craft your pitch and make your pitch even better. Because once you start to see, what a company does and what artists they work with and what products they produce, and you'll start to see patterns. So, maybe they only partner with a few artists and they create a whole collection of work with those artists and they roll those out as products. And if that's the case, then the way you pitch them would be totally different than somebody who develops hundreds of products a year and is looking for illustrators constantly to just pump out artwork for those products. And so you have to understand the size of the company and what it is they're doing there and what it is they're looking for so that you can approach them in the best way. So that's a great question. Do you have suggestions about how to find those companies? For example, is it better to go with bigger ones, popular, or some smaller ones? We're going to go over this more tomorrow, but what I suggest is you go for bigger ones who are really popular and you go for the small ones. So what I found is a lot of illustrators, the majority of their income comes from little small one-off projects that then turn into ongoing opportunities for them. And so the small projects, even though they're not glamorous and fun and interesting all of the time, they are a great way to get money in the door. And it's easier to convince a small business to hire you as an illustrator than it is to sell in a big idea to a big company. So I think that you should try and find those smaller companies because selling in your work and selling in your ideas is going to be much easier, but they're going to have much smaller budgets. So have the smaller ones on there. But at the same time, you should approach the bigger ones. And what happens with bigger companies is the bigger the company, the longer like lead time they have. So when we were working on marketing campaigns for Procter and Gamble, we were planning December marketing campaigns in July because like that you have to plan 6 months ahead to get it all rolled out. And so the bigger companies, if you pitch them today, they might want to talk to you about a project that's not going to start for 9 months. And so that's really hard to kind of like constantly be waiting and waiting and waiting that these big things might come through. And then you never know how big they are. So what I found is the smaller clients are great for kind of bringing regular income in and getting people, to hire you and getting work and building your portfolio. And those big clients are great because they give you huge credibility and they're a big credential for you. And so if you can also pitch like half and half, I think that that would be great because what you'll do is get some smaller deals in the door now so that you can get some money and some income from your work. And then you'll be planting seeds for bigger deals that will come down the road, which I think sets you up both then for short-term and long-term success. Awesome. So when we're thinking about pitching art directors, uh, so most of what we're going to talk about is pitching via email because the reality is you can email them, you can mail them something, or you can call them. No artist I've ever talked to has been like, oh, I'll call them. That would be fun. Artists do not tend to enjoy the phone, especially calling someone they don't know out of the blue and doing a sales pitch. So we're gonna kind of like leave that off. If you want to talk about cold calling, I'm happy to. But if you're not comfortable doing that, you're also probably not that great at doing it. So just don't worry about that. So then the other two are kind of email pitching and then doing direct mail. The direct mail is it's expensive. I mean, you have to pay to print and to ship something, and they might respond to that in the same way they respond to an email. You never know. So I always kind of push like when you're starting out, go with email first. If you have clients and you're looking to grow, then do a combination of email and mailers. But don't spend a bunch of money creating and sending out mailers in the beginning when you're unsure if that's going to pay off for you or what kind of work it's going to generate. So most of the pitching we're talking about is through email. And so what you're going to do in the exercise for tonight is you're going to start to craft your email pitch that you would send out to art directors. And crafting that pitch will give you a really great way to talk about your business and talk about your artwork in conversation as well. So what is a pitch? A pitch should answer three things. It should answer the questions, who are you? What do you want? And why do I care? So when someone opens an email or gets a letter in the mail, you're basically at first glance, you're scanning it to figure out like to gather the basic details. Who is this person? What did they want from me? And then finally, you're kind of like, do I care? Because the reality is we all have limited time. We don't have a lot of time in the day. We get tons and tons of emails. Our directors are pitched all the time. And so showing them why they should care is really, really important. And so most artists tend to think that it is that what makes them special is in their aesthetic, but it's not just your aesthetic. So your aesthetic and your style and the type of artwork you can create is one tool in your toolbox. That is the product that you create. But what you have to offer is so much more than that. And so what you have to offer is your experience, whether it is in design and illustration or another industry. Your past experience influences what you're able to do for your clients now. And so it's really important for you to kind of honor the work that you've done in the past and the things that you've accomplished, because that says a lot about you, even if it's not related within the industry. And then the other thing is your skill set and your personality. So if you are a big idea person and you're like always have the most creative ideas and everyone loves your ideas, that might be your superpower. If you're a very technical artist and you can do very detailed mock-ups and lines, like that might be your special skill set. If you're an illustrator who can move really fast and just like pump great art, quality artwork out quickly, that is a skill that you have. And so what you're going to do is take an assessment of the different skills and the different experiences that you have, and start to figure out what story you're going to tell potential clients. And so your pitch is basically a story that answers the three questions: who are you, what do you do, and why do I care? And so in the beginning of that story, what you're going to do is talk about, first you're going to tell them what it is you do. So I always start out by saying, hi, so and so. My name is Cassie Boorn. I've spent 5 years working as a freelance marketing consultant. So it can be very kind of basic of like, I'm a freelance children illustrator. I'm a licensing artist. Some people try to get really creative with this, but it all means the same things, and the art director knows what you mean. And so don't worry about it. Just be direct of like what it is that you do. If you can include in that sentence a certain number of years that you've worked, if you're pitching local clients, I would include where you're based, or if you're based in like a really big city. Like I always say, if people are based in like LA or New York or San Francisco, then just call yourself an LA based artist, because it's like you get some credibility for like being an artist and surviving in LA. So because it's so expensive in LA and New York, like I could never live there. But just always including those things in your bio that kind of make you stick out and kind of show something that's special about you. And then the next thing that you're going to share is a paragraph that has a story of kind of what you do. So what I usually do is start out with a sentence about your past experience and how that has brought you to where you are. So, or sorry, what you're doing now, and then your past experience. So what I will say is, oh no, so I'm getting mixed up. It'll be your past experience and then the future. So I will say, I spent 5 years managing marketing programs for Fortune 500 companies before launching my freelance marketing business. So take whatever it is you were doing before, or whatever, it is that you've done, and then, show them, kind of let them follow around path. And the reason you do that is because, one, it shows them what your past experience is, what kind of work you've done, what you've been successful at, but it also makes them part of this, part of your story. Like they're seeing you move from this to this, and like it kind of builds a connection with them, because now you're telling them a story. So I used to do this and now I do this. And then the next sentence is going to talk about what makes your work special. So my specialty is, and then you're going to have a sentence talking about it. So you have to figure out what that special thing is. And maybe just, start making a list, but start talking to people who've looked at your artwork and ask them what they like about it, or what it is that they find interesting about it, and ask a bunch of people and find the things that all of them are saying. So if they're all like, you use color in ways that I never imagined, or your bright colors inspire me, or your abstract scenes are just beautiful, like whatever it is that the words that they're using to describe your work, start to compile that list so you can understand what people find most interesting about your work. And so when you say my specialty, it usually has to do with the type of work that you are able to create and what makes that special, and then what makes you special as an artist. So here's an example. You might say, my specialty is creating or colorful modern designs for colorful modern designs for stationery products. So it kind of shows like that's what makes you special in your style, and what you do. And then you can say, yeah, sorry, my special. Oh, so you want to say my specialty is creating modern, colorful designs for stationery products that I'm sorry, I'm like trying to piece the sentences together. I'm thinking of an example on the spot, which is really hard. Okay, I'm going to back up. So you're going to tell them my specialty is, and then whatever that special thing you do is going to go there, and then we're going to have a separate sentence. So it might be my specialty is creating modern, colorful designs for the stationery market that attracts young, hip, urban women. So, that explains what your style is, why people like it, and who likes your style, who the market is, the customers that are really drawn to your work. And then what you can say after that is, I am great at, and then you're going to fill in the blank, but it's going to be like, I'm great at meeting tight deadlines, producing artwork that aligns with the specifications of your project, taking a creative idea and putting all the pieces together to implement it. There are all of these things that you can say so the first sentence is showing what it is that makes your artwork special and what makes your aesthetic special. And then the second sentence is talking about the skills that you have to actually help them with their project. And so through all of this, what they're learning about you is what you used to do, what your job was before, how that's influenced what you're doing now, what is special about your artwork and your style, why they should work with you, because what makes you a good freelancer to hire. And then after that paragraph, you're gonna have the kind of call to action or the ask. So what you want to do is say something that ask them something that makes them that they have to respond. So one good idea is let me know, or you could link to your website portfolio and say, you can check out my portfolio here. Let me know if you want me to send you access to my full portfolio. So if you have a private portfolio website that has all of your work and then some of your work's on your website, you could say, check out this work. Let me know if you want the private one. So if they have read this email and they like your work at all, they're going to ask you for access to the private portfolio, whether or not they know if they're going to hire you. But you at least know that all of those people that asked, that like there was something that caught their eye, and they're not going to get access to the rest of the art unless they ask you. Another one you could do is let me know if this looks like a fit, and we can set up a call to discuss how we might be able to work together. Usually I'll add some language in there like the call will be really short. I'll get right to the point. I won't take up too much your time, that kind of thing. Or ask them if you could share your portfolio. Like, would it be okay if I sent you my portfolio so you can keep it on hand in case you have any projects? And probably they're at least going to respond and say, sure, send it to me. So having that call to action. And I'm going to send you guys some worksheets and some instructions tonight that actually help you craft all of that. So I know that some of you are probably madly taking notes, but don't stress out. You're going to get all the details you need to take your story and kind of craft that pitch for yourself. But this initial pitch is really meant to, in a very short, concise, to the point way, introduce what you do to clients and generate some interest with them and figure out who is interested in your work. And so once you have this pitch crafted, which it's 10 sentences in total, it's very simple, but it's that process of figuring out what makes my work special, what skills do I have, what market does my work fit in, how can I talk about my skills in a way that's going to make them interested in my work. Answering those big questions, that is the hard part. But once you find the answers and you figure out, what those answers are, then actually writing and crafting the email pitch is really, really easy. And then once you have that email pitch, you basically have a story that you can tell anyone. So I have an email pitch that I use to go out for new marketing clients. And a lot of times I will take the exact, like I will find myself using the exact language I use in my pitch to tell people what I do because it's just already in my head and I don't have to think of anything else. And so it's a great way to kind of figure out how to explain what it is. So if you're I'm a children's book illustrator, and I create, I focus on character development for middle, middle school age kids. but figuring out what that is and how to talk about it. Okay, I'm going to pause and we have some time here for question and answer. So I want you guys to ask any questions you have, and they can be specifically about your work and your portfolio and how to talk about your experience, or they can be more general about some of the topics that I just discussed. I see a couple of you typing. And I think a lot of times what happens is once you start crafting your pitch and start actually putting it on paper, that's when you kind of come up with questions or you start questioning yourself of what you should include or shouldn't include. So something I'm going to offer all of you is if you, once you craft your email pitch, I'm gonna have you send it to me and then I'll edit it and send it back to you. Because I have done this for a few artists and each time it took me like 5 minutes because from an outside perspective, you can always see like where the email stops being interesting or what is confusing. So I can look at your pitch and I'll tell you what to change on it. But I'm happy to do that. So you can email me your pitch and once it's done and I will help you out. I basically just starting out, so I don't have too much proven experience to show. I say I understand the importance of deadlines and taking direction as data. Okay, so this is a great question. While I'm answering this, I have a question for you, Michelle. What was your career before this? What did you do before? So, okay, when you don't have any experience, the best thing you can do is create personal projects. So you can create projects without a client assigning them to you or without anyone asking you to and put them in your portfolio. Oh, great. Okay. So you can do personal projects and put them in your portfolio, and no one, whew, did you see that fly? No one cares that you didn't, it wasn't like a client hired you and then you created this and, that was a process. They just care that you have great work in your portfolio that showcases what you can do. So, and what I found is most people who include their client work on their website, their like work they have to do for clients doesn't at all represent their style. And so their portfolio is at either like really clunky and dysfunctional and there's just lots of different things happening, or it doesn't represent the work they want to be doing, so they keep attracting the wrong clients. So there is a benefit to not already having tons of client work to put on your portfolio. But the bad side is that you do have to kind of develop some of that work yourself. So I would think of three like dream projects. Like if I could do a book cover, or if I could do, a magazine editorial for something, whatever it is, or for a specific magazine, come up with a dream project and just pretend you were hired to do it and do the project and then put that in your portfolio. So all that matters on your portfolio is they understand your aesthetic, your skill set, what you're able to do as an artist, and that's presented in a really understandable way. So then it doesn't matter that you never worked as an illustrator because you were trained as an illustrator and you have this huge portfolio. You have a portfolio of work to show. It doesn't have to be huge. You have a portfolio of work to showcase. So on that side, you're good. And then the way that you talk, about your story. Okay, so you trained as an illustrator. So the working in production services at a photo agency, that is probably where you learned your skills managing projects and meeting tight deadlines and getting stuff done at a fast pace. So I think what you could say is, I've worked the majority of my career has been working managing production services at a photo agency. And any way you can make that sound fancier is good. So if you could say at a large photo agency, or if you were an executive, or if you spent 10 years as a manager managing like any words you can use to make it sound like, you have this career, this is what you were doing, but your passion has always been for illustration. So you can say, I was trained as an illustrator at whatever school. But I spent my career working in production services at a photo agency, and I recently left to pursue my illustration full time. And you can look at and then you present your portfolio and the type of work you do and that kind of thing. But what that story does is it shows the art director like you have always had a passion for illustration, so you're going to be very dedicated and you're going to put a lot of time into it because this is what you want to be doing with your life. And it also shows that you have the professional skills needed to have a really big career or to have a career in another field. And so she sees, okay, she has the professional experience, she has an incredible portfolio of work, and then it's basically giving the art director an opportunity to like give you your first shot, or give you your first project, which a lot of people like people want to help people. So even like art director sounds like a very intimidating word, but it's like people who are art directors became art directors because they love artists and because like they love art. And so if your portfolio appeals to them and they're like, wow, this girl is really hustling. She developed this portfolio. She's changing careers. I think she'd be great for this project. Then it's like an added benefit that they get to kind of, help you get started or give you a foot in the door, because that just makes people feel good because it feels good to help others kind of move up. So don't feel like you have to hide that like this wasn't my career or wasn't my first choice or I took different paths along the way. Don't feel like you have to hide that because you're self-conscious about it. Instead, use that to show that that's one of the things that makes you special as an artist. What visuals should be included for the first pitch? So everyone always asks this, and there are lots of mixed opinions. But my approach and strategy, I think, is you should only include a link to your website or a link to a page on your website. So if you have a specific like collection you want them to see, or if like all of your new artwork is on one page, or a lot of portfolios you'll have like your best artwork on your homepage, then what I would do is say, hey, you can check out my initial work here. Because when they're getting the email, they're not going to make any hard decisions. It's basically like they open it and they decide like, do I like their work at all? Could I work with them ever or no? And that's it. Like they're trying to weigh, is this person a fit or not? And so they don't need to see tons and tons of your artwork. They'll look at your website and it will either be like, oh, there might be a way for us to work together, or no, not a fit. So I just would include the website, but I would always say, you can see a portion of my portfolio here. Let me know if you need to see more, and I will follow up with more examples. And then you can have like a PDF or a private portfolio to show them, so that basically it's like, first you want to know like, am I a fit at all? Are you interested in my style at all? And if they're like, yes, your style is interesting, then you'll send them more examples from there. Does that help, Lori? Awesome. Okay. Katie, one problem I have is that I've worked with clients, but not editorial ones, just for schools. Should I mention this in the pitch, or is this just distracting, as the image I create for editorial are quite different? Don't mention in the pitch because it's just distracting. So what you should do is basically the way that you sell to schools and to that market is completely different than to the way that you're going to sell to the editorial market. And so it's just like living in two worlds. Like the two, there isn't a lot of overlap unless you're pitching like kids editorial magazines. Like maybe your style would be relevant, but it doesn't sound like it is. It sounds like you have two different styles. So what I would do is say that you're a freelance illustrator who specializes in the editorial illustration, like kind of describe that piece of it. So then if they go to your website and they see like that you have these school illustrations and this editorial, it's okay. It depends on how you present, but it's okay because what you're saying is, I'm a freelance illustrator. Like I take my skills and apply them to many different markets, but my specialty is editorial illustration. And then you should have a page with just your editorial illustrations, and that's where you should send them. So then they'll go there and instantly get a sense of what your editorial style is and if they're interested in that, and they won't get distracted by the other illustrations. But if they click around on your site, they're not going to be confused that you work in different markets. Does that make sense? Yeah. And you can and you can use also your the things that so you can use the experience from the schools in different ways. So one thing you could do is, if you've illustrated for schools for 5 years and you've never done editorial illustration, you can just say, I've been a freelance illustrator for the past 5 years and I specialize in editorial illustration. And like they assume that means you've been doing editorial illustration for 5 years, but that's not actually what you said. You just said that you've done freelance illustration for 5 years and you specialize in editorial. So it's kind of a way to like to take your experience and show how it impacts your current experience. Because does that make sense how I said that? Sorry. Um, and then Oh, and then if you have any clients that are really big name, or if you've won awards or your work has been featured somewhere, always include that in there too. So one example, I worked with an illustrator who had done illustrations for this publishing company, but she was just totally embarrassed by the book was like not her style at all, and she did the illustrations because they paid her to, but not because it fit her style. And she didn't want anyone to know she illustrated the book. But it was for a really big publisher. So she was like, how do I include that publisher and that experience in my portfolio? And how do I talk about that without pointing them to the book? Because if they look at the book, they're going to be like, that's ugly. So, what I suggested is, like, in her bio and in her pitch, she could say, I've worked with nationally recognized publishers such as X, without actually referencing the specific book. So if you've worked with a big school or worked with big corporations, or if you've worked with editorial outlets in other capacities, use that experience to figure out how you can talk about what it is that you do, and how that makes you special. All right, does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so tonight you're going to get 3 worksheets. And so the first worksheet is going to help you narrow down what markets to focus on. And I'm going to include just some blurbs kind of explaining how the markets work, and then help you figure out what markets to focus on. The second worksheet is going to help you identify all of the things that make you special. So what makes your artwork special, what makes you special as an illustrator, what makes your work really interesting to people, so that you can start to understand where you can have the most impact. And then the third worksheet is going to help you take all of that information and create a compelling pitch that will make people want to hire you. And so we're going to take everything you learned about your market and the companies, and everything you learned about what makes your artwork special and why you're interesting, and we're going to combine it into a pitch that you can use to approach new clients. And then in tomorrow's session, and you don't have to do all the worksheets tonight, you don't have to have them all done by tomorrow's session. That is not necessary. Give yourself the week to kind of work on it, because it is a process. And tomorrow's session is going to be totally focused on how do you build a list. So how do you research companies? How do you find contacts at those companies? And how do you build a list of people that you can then go out and approach? And then our final day, we're going to actually put the two together and show you how to take your pitch and go out there and approach people, and then turn that into new projects. And so you don't have to have your pitch done right away. Don't put a lot of pressure on it, because I find like the more you kind of sit on it and think and reflect, the better it comes together. And then once you get your pitch together, whatever that is, then you email it to me and I will send you a round of edits. And so through this process, we'll all have a really great pitch that kind of summarizes what your experience is, what you have to offer clients, what makes your work really special, so that when you approach clients, you catch their eye and you stand out from all of the other artists and illustrators who are approaching them because you were just direct and to the point and you presented the information that they were looking for in a really succinct and clear way. And that just says a lot about what it'll be like to work with you, that you can take time and kind of create a cohesive story. So I will send all of that out by it's going to come a little bit later today. It'll be the latest it'll be is 8 p.m. Central Time, but you have plenty of time to work on it. So let me know. Does anyone have any questions about the worksheets or the classes or how anything is going to work before we wrap up? And I do want to mention we are a little early wrapping up today. There were not as many questions as I expected. This fly is just, he wants to be in the video so bad and he keeps circling my head. So we ran a little short today, but I think that tomorrow's session will most likely run over because it's always everyone's favorite topic and usually brings up lots of questions. So I will be here, and if you have other questions, just let me know. But I will see you all tomorrow. You'll get the worksheets tonight, and then tomorrow we'll be back here at the same time to talk about building your list and finding your clients. But thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.